guys, it's Kira and welcome back to another video. Since about May of this year, I have been sharing a monthly favourites at the end of each month on this channel, but as December is coming to an end, I decided instead of just doing a regular monthly favourites, the year is also coming to an end, so I'm going to be sharing my 2020 favourites with you today. As always, I'll be delving into my favourite books, TV shows, movies, music, podcasts, and lots of other things. But instead of just one thing for each of those topics, I'll be sharing a few and talking about things that I have loved throughout this entire year. But before I jump into all of those different topics, I wanted to share what has actually been my favourite thing in general for this entire year, and the thing that has brought me the most joy, and that has been this community here on YouTube. My channel has grown quite significantly this year, and honestly, every single person who has watched one of my videos, who has liked one, who has left a comment or really just engaged with my content in any way has genuinely brought me so much joy, because this has been a year where communities in the real world have obviously been so much more disconnected, and we haven't been able to talk to people as much as we normally would in real life. But I haven't really felt that sense of isolation because I've had the most wonderful community of people here on YouTube. Every time one of you guys comments, it genuinely makes me so happy to see you talking about things that I'm interested in and basically just creating so many incredible connections and friendships all over the world. And honestly, I cannot express how grateful I am for any of you who are here watching this video or watching any of my videos. It genuinely means so much to me, because on this channel I really do share the things that I'm most passionate about, the bits of my life that I love the most, and it's so exciting to be able to share that with other people who share the same passions. And I'm hoping that where I found a sense of community this year, and I felt that sense of being connected to people in a really difficult year, I'm hoping that some of you will have also felt that sense of connection and maybe felt a little bit less lonely in a year that has been so difficult. So before I jump into all of my other favourites, I just wanted you to know that you watching right now are one of my favourite things from this year, and I appreciate every single one of you so much. So with that being said, let's jump into the normal favourites from the rest of 2020. Wow. Let's jump in. Why can't I talk? So with that being said, let's jump into the regular favourites from the rest of 2020. As always, let's kick it off with books. I have selected 2 favourite books from 2020. However, I know a lot of you love talking about books, as I do, and so as well as these top 2 books that I think are my favourite books from the whole year, I've also got a video going up on my channel which will be my top 10 books of 2020, where I'll be diving into even more books and talking about them in even more depth. So don't worry about it. If you want me to talk about even more books, that is on the way as well. But my number 1 book of this year has to be Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. I read this book for the first time in March, I believe. I read this one after having read Normal People earlier in the year. Normal People, spoiler for my top 10 books of the year, is also one of my favourite books of 2020. But Conversations with Friends just edged itself out a little bit further. I've now read both Normal People and Conversations with Friends twice, and honestly, I love them both so much, but Conversations with Friends was just such a special book, I think. In this book, we follow our main character Frances. She is a 21-year-old student at Trinity College, Dublin. She performs spoken word poetry with her best friend Bobby, who also happens to be her ex-girlfriend. And one day when they are performing spoken word poetry, they're spotted by a journalist, Melissa, who wants to write a piece on them. So she decides to invite Frances and Bobby over to her house for a dinner party. And at this party, they meet Nick, Melissa's husband. Bobby takes quite an interest in Melissa, whilst Frances and Nick create this really interesting connection. And from this connection, and from these 4 people meeting and connecting randomly, a very messy square of relationships is formed. Each of these 4 people is connected with each other in so many different ways, both platonically and romantically, and we see through these 4 people and the relationships that they have with one another how connected each relationship we form is to all of our other relationships. And by relationships, I don't just mean romantic relationships, I mean that your relationship with your mum or your sister ultimately impacts how you interact with the rest of the world, because each of the relationships that we have and each of the interactions we have with people that are close to us is so formative, and this book really dives into the fact that love is so complex and can be found and manifested in so many different forms that it's really interesting to see how each of these versions of love connects with and influences the other, and it's just such an incredible book. Frances deals with some quite difficult topics as well. This book dives into the topic of endometriosis, something that affects a lot of people and isn't really well portrayed, and this book dives into the way that these sort of problems can obviously be really overlooked and diminished and just sort of seen as people being overdramatic. And this book again dives into the struggles people have and the way that women can then just push aside their problems and allow them to get a lot worse because they fear this sensation of being told that they're just being dramatic. And so this book is incredible in so many ways. Sally Rooney creates relationships that are just so interesting to read about, and I would say that Sally Rooney doesn't create characters, she creates people, in the sense that the characters that she writes about don't just feel like two-dimensional fictional people. They genuinely feel like someone who has a real, very complex and very interesting life, and I absolutely love this book so much. I know a lot of people don't like this one as much as normal people, but for me it's just incredible. And then the second book that I've picked is a classic. I decided for this 2020 favourites I wanted one contemporary and one classic, and the classic I've selected is Emma by Jane Austen. This was another one that I read for the first time in spring. Spring was a great time for books, for me at least, and I absolutely loved this book. This is the book that really changed my view of Jane Austen. Prior to this, I had read a couple of Jane Austen books. I'd read Persuasion at university, I'd read Northanger Abbey, which was my favourite until this point, and then I had also read Pride and Prejudice, and whilst I had enjoyed them to an extent, I hadn't been like enamoured by the characters, and then Emma came along and really changed that and has kind of made me want to reread all of Jane Austen's books, because honestly this book has changed everything. And then I also read Sense and Sensibility after this one and really loved that as well. Emma is a book which focuses on our main character Emma. She is a 21-year-old protagonist who is a very wealthy woman. Her dad is a widow and her sister is already married, so she essentially gets like the run of the house and basically is able to oversee her entire estate. Because of her wealth, she doesn't really need to get married. In terms of Jane Austen's characters often need to get married because marriage is so important for finding your place in society, and a lot of her characters are less financially well off and obviously need to marry because it's so important for them to be able to support themselves. And yet in Emma we see the exact opposite of that, because she doesn't need to get married at all for wealth, because she has more wealth than anyone could ever need, and therefore she instead sets herself up as a matchmaker, trying to put different people together and creating a lot of chaos in the process. I've talked about Emma so much this year, so I'm sorry if you're getting bored of me talking about it. I promise I'll stop at some point, but at the same time, I probably won't, because it's just so good. And what I love about Emma is the fact that she is a really relatable protagonist. Not relatable in the sense that I can relate to being an 18th century rich lady, because obviously I cannot, but in the sense that she is a flawed character. She's a character who has prejudices, who makes judgments, who isn't nice to everyone, and who makes mistakes, and someone who we see grow, develop, and really mature throughout the course of the book. And that's something that I really like, because I do feel like female characters of this era tended to be just these perfect, moral, and completely unobtainable people, like people who you could never really find in real life. Whereas Emma, though she is obviously a fictional character and is really funny and fun to read about, also feels like a character who portrays something that I think is within everyone, which is that human sense of judgment that means that you don't like everyone and sometimes you do things that are not very nice, but you have the capacity to grow and change and do better. So I just love Emma as a character. I would also say that whilst I love this Penguin Deluxe Classic copy of Emma, my incredibly talented friend Carolyn, who some of you might know either from the Dark Academics Book Club or from her channel Carolyn Marie Reads, is studying illustration at university, and she just did a project where she created a cover design for Emma by Jane Austen. I'm gonna link to the post on her Instagram where she shows it, because honestly I wish nothing more than for that copy to be out in the world and actually be on a purchasable copy of the book, because it is so beautiful and I absolutely love it. So that is, I guess, another favourite of this year is Carolyn's beautiful art, and in particular her take on Jane Austen's Emma, because her design was so beautiful. Next up we have favourite TV shows and movies. And in keeping with the conversation that we just had, a favourite movie of this year was in fact the new adaptation of Emma that came out in February. I ended up watching that on my birthday and I could not have picked a better film to watch to celebrate my birthday because it was wonderful. The cast is absolutely incredible. We have Anya Taylor-Joy who plays Emma herself and she's absolutely incredible, could not have cast someone better. There is also Callum Turner playing Frank Churchill, who some of you might also know from either the E4 series, which was Glue, or War and Peace, BBC miniseries. He played Anatole Karagan. And then we also have Josh O'Connor, who is playing Mr. Elton, who I think a lot of you will now recognise as playing Prince Charles in The Crown. So such an incredible cast. They brought to life Emma so well. It was so aesthetically pleasing, very like soft cottagecore English countryside in its aesthetic, and honestly I am so obsessed with it. It is incredible. I loved it. So that is the only movie that I have to recommend, and that has been my ultimate favourite movie for the year. But I also have 2 TV shows. I've roughly touched on one already because I was talking about Josh O'Connor, and one of my favourite series from the whole year, which I actually only found in November, was The Crown. I just love doing my favourite The Crown accent because honestly I'm so here for it. It's so much fun to just like immerse yourself in the world of the royal family. I'm not someone who I would consider to be like particularly invested in the real life royal family, and that's why I think I've enjoyed this so much, because it's stuff that I have never really learnt about before. You obviously start right in the 1930s, I think, when Queen Elizabeth was coronated. Is that the right word? When she was made queen, basically. So you have a young Queen Elizabeth, young Prince Philip, and we see them going through their lives, and then you move into the later times when then Prince Charles and Diana and Camilla and all of that drama is happening. And there's just so much stuff that I had never even heard of. A character who I was particularly invested in, who I didn't even know existed, like I had no idea about this person, was Princess Margaret, the Queen's sister. She's played by Vanessa Kirby in the earlier seasons, and then by Helena Bonham Carter in the later seasons, and both of those actresses are incredible, and I absolutely can say that Princess Margaret is my favourite member of the royal family because honestly she was just so interesting and I absolutely loved it. But The Crown in general was so amazing. You don't need to be invested in the royal family to watch it because obviously it follows real events, but it also just feels like a general period drama, and it is obviously dramatised versions of things that happened in real life, so it's just really fun to watch. So that is the first TV show I have to recommend. The second one is Normal People, which is of course the TV adaptation of Sally Rooney's book, and that one came out at the end of April, I believe, and honestly it was amazing. They brought to life Connell and Marianne so incredibly well, and honestly it's just such a perfect companion to the book Normal People. The music choices, the aesthetic of the series, and just the way that they explored Connell and Marianne's relationship was so incredibly beautiful. And honestly I'm just a little bit obsessed with them because Daisy Edgar-Jones and Paul Mescal brought them to life so well, and honestly I have watched that series several times already and I'm not planning to stop anytime soon because it is just so incredible. Like I cannot even express how good it is. Next up we have podcasts. Now I definitely listened to less podcasts this year than I did last year, and that was mostly because I'm someone who listens to podcasts a lot on my commute to and from work, and given the fact that we've been in lockdowns for a large portion of this year, I haven't been doing quite as much driving. But there are 2 podcasts that I have loved throughout this year. The first one is Gilmore Guys, which is a podcast where basically the 2 hosts are watching Gilmore Girls and doing an episode for each single episode of the show. One of the hosts, Kevin, is a long-time fan of Gilmore Girls, and the other host, Demi, has never watched Gilmore Girls. So you have this really interesting comparison of someone going back into the series for the millionth time and then someone experiencing it over and over again. Demi and Kevin are so hilarious, and the episodes of the podcast have such chaotic energy, which really mirrors that chaos that you get from watching Gilmore Girls. That's like fun and just like very fast-paced chaos, and I absolutely love it. It's so fun to hear them talking about the episodes, and I absolutely love it. And then the second podcast is We Need to Talk About That Right Now by Jessie and BB Cave. Jessie and Bibi are sisters, and their podcast is one that is really difficult to pinpoint because I don't really think that they particularly fall into any real clear category. It's generally just a lifestyle podcast. They just basically chat, and because they're sisters and they obviously have such a great relationship with each other, their personality just bounce off of each other. They just have the most interesting conversations. They're very harsh with each other, but in a funny way that you can tell is just in keeping with their relationship and their personalities, and they're just so funny, honestly. It's just one of those podcasts that I really struggle to describe why I love it, but it is just them as people and as podcast hosts that makes it such an enjoyable listening experience. Next up, I have a couple of products to talk to you about. Now, as you'll be able to see from my hair, I definitely have curly hair. I have always been someone who used to straighten my hair basically my entire life. I never left my hair natural until a couple of years ago when Jay and I went on a 4-week-long holiday in Europe, and we didn't want to pack heavily. So I decided to leave the straighteners at home and brave the natural hair. And I basically decided to just give it a try when we got back from that holiday. And I've kind of not turned back ever since, because I noticed that when I stopped straightening my hair, the curls started to come back, and it has definitely been a process, and I think it's still an ongoing process, but gradually the curls have changed and developed, and they've come back stronger and less frizzy on top, and basically I'm really, really happy with how my hair progress is going. However, like I said, it's still a process, and I'm still working on finding the curly hair routine that works best for my type of hair. And I've recently found a couple of products that I have actually mentioned in some vlogs that I think have been really helping my hair out. And the first one is this Tangle Teaser brush. This is a wet brush for thick and untamable hair that you're meant to use in the shower. I've generally seen a lot of evidence that suggests that with curly hair, you should try and avoid brushing it when dry as much as possible, and try and only brush it when it's wet, because obviously when you brush out curly hair, you just end up looking like Hagrid, and it's not something that anyone wants to see. So this one is meant to be a lot more gentle, and it's meant to avoid breakage and damaging the curl pattern, and I've been loving it. And then the other the other product is another one from Tangle Teaser, and that is this Everyday Detangling Cream Spray. It is marked as vegan and cruelty-free, which obviously is something that I look for in all of my products because I'm vegan. And this one is made with shea butter, meant to moisturise, nourish, tames frizz, and is made for thick and curly hair, which I have definitely got. So I apply this in the shower, then brush out with the Tangle Teaser, and then scrunch my hair with a t-shirt and basically just leave it to dry naturally. And I'm not sure how well it's showing up on the camera because it's quite a dark day, but I do feel like it has been making my hair more bouncy, it's been making the curls a bit more ringlety. And of course, it's a process, and I feel like a lot of people who have been straighteners most of their life and have then kind of tried to embrace curly hair don't really know what they're doing. I certainly don't, at least, and it really is just such a learning process. But I feel like I'm getting more and more in tune with what my hair needs all the time, and those are two products that I absolutely recommend. So great if you're vegan, because they're vegan and cruelty-free, and also great if you have curly hair and you want something that's going to nourish it, because honestly my hair has never felt so soft, and I am here for it, and it also smells delicious. So that is the first product. The second product is one that I don't have here with me because it's large, bulky, and almost impossible to show on camera, at least in this camera angle, but that is my Lifeform yoga mat. Lifeform is a yoga mat brand which is quite expensive. Their mats are over £100, which is more than I'd ever spent on a yoga mat before, but I decided to ask for one for my birthday back in May because they're meant to be the best mats ever, and I wasn't sure if it was just an aesthetic thing, but actually practically they are so good. They're made from a much thinner material than other yoga mats. They have a small cushiony undersurface and then a really, really grippy top layer. And that grippy top layer is what makes all the difference, because in downward dog, in handstand, in crow pose, in any poses where your hands and feet are meant to stay in one place, with cheaper yoga mats you'll find yourself sliding around, and although it's not the end of the world, it also makes it really hard to be completely stable and to achieve poses in the best way that you know you can, whereas these mats are so grippy that once you put yourself somewhere, you're not going anywhere unless you specifically move yourself. Again, if you watch my yoga channel, you'll have seen this mat that I've got because it's in pretty much all of those videos, so I'll insert a clip of me using it, but it is just so incredible. I've never felt such good quality in a yoga mat. I got the white magic mat, which is basically a white one with the gold detailing, but they have so many different versions, and honestly they are all so beautiful. But really, if you are someone who does yoga a lot and takes your practice seriously, and you know that it will be a worthwhile investment and you know that you use it regularly, then I definitely would say that spending the money on this mat would be worthwhile, not only for your own practice but also for the environment, because the thing with cheaper mats is that they don't last as long, they fade out, and they become really slippery quite quickly, so you end up replacing them often, and of course that's so much wastage of mats going to the landfill basically. Whereas these Lifeform mats, yes, they're more expensive, but the quality is there and you know it's not going to fade out. They're meant to last years and years and years. So I would personally say it's definitely worth it, and if I need a new yoga mat again in the future, I know I'll definitely get a Lifeform one because the quality is just like nothing else I've experienced. Next up, we have some YouTubers. There are 3 YouTubers I'd love to talk about, and I'm sure I've talked about all of them many times before, so I'll try to be brief. But the first one is Morgan Long. Morgan is a YouTuber that I came across this year, and honestly, her content is the most aesthetically pleasing content I've ever seen. Her videography skills are incredible, her editing is incredible, and as a person, Morgan is, I can vouch for, just such a lovely person. Whenever we've spoken, she is just such a kind and uplifting soul, and she genuinely just feels like such a joyful person to watch and to speak to. And basically the aura of positivity that she expresses on her channel is just so infectious that you immediately feel positive when you watch her videos. And she is also so kind, goes out of her way to be lovely to people and to interact with everyone, and honestly she's just amazing, so I would 100% recommend Morgan. The next person is Noelle Gallagher. Noelle is a booktuber and she is amazing. Her makeup skills are unparalleled, her eyeshadow is always on point, and as a person she just seems really cool. Noelle is one of my favourite booktubers in general because of the range of books that she discusses. She is a fellow Stephen King fan, she's also a lover of romance books, and she's also studying English literature at a postgraduate level, so she talks about some classics as well, and you can just tell that she reads such a range of books and doesn't read books just because she thinks that she has to or because they're the types of books that everyone is reading. She just reads books for enjoyment and then talks about them in such a wonderful, intelligent and just interesting way, and I also love her vlogs, which are just incredible, so absolutely love Noelle. And then the final channel that I have loved this year is Isabelle Page. Isabelle is someone who is based in the Pacific Northwest, I believe, in the mountain area near Seattle, and she basically has moved from the city over to some land that her parents have in the mountains. She's built a tiny house, she's a yoga teacher, and she is basically just living the most minimal lifestyle. She finds so much joy in every single thing that she does, whether that is going for a mountain walk, seeing a sunrise, basically making something from scratch, like she's made some shawls, she's made mugs, she made her own home, of course, and of course she just brings that joy and really encourages you as the viewer, without even saying it, to appreciate the little things, because she seems to find so much joy in appreciating every single experience that she has in life, and that again is just so contagious, because you then start to think about all of the things that you have to be grateful for, all of the wonderful nature that surrounds us and the experiences that we have, and her channel is just incredible. Again, videography is beautiful, she is in the most incredible location, and it's just wonderful to watch, so I absolutely love all 3 of those women. They are so great, and I will have them all linked down below. Next up, we have my favourite music from 2020. 2020 was a great year for music, particularly thanks to one artist, and her name is of course Taylor Swift. I'm sure none of you are surprised, but Taylor Swift dropped not 1 but 2 new albums this year, and those albums are everything that I love about music. They are whimsical, they focus on storytelling, they are generally quite calm, acoustic-y, and just absolutely beautiful. Her first album came out over summer, which was Folklore, and then a follow-up album, Evermore, came out in December. And honestly, all of the songs on those albums are incredible, but I have narrowed it down to a top 3. from each of those albums. My top 3 changes all the time because it is just so bloody difficult to decide because there are so many good ones. But from Folklore, my top 3 songs are Exile, Cardigan and August. And then from Evermore, my top 3 songs are Champagne Problems, 'Tis the Damn Season and Evermore. Although it's just so hard, there's so many good ones, but those are some of my favourite songs, and just those 2 albums in general are definitely the musical highlights of 2020 for me. And then finally, as a new addition to my favourites, not something that I'll be doing every single month, but something I wanted to do at the end of the year, and particularly at the end of this year, was to reflect on my favourite moment of 2020. As we all know, this has been a really unprecedented year. There has been some significantly difficult times, and we've all faced a lot of challenges as life as we know it has completely shifted. And it is really easy to focus on what has been negative, and of course, if you have had a negative year experience, then that is completely fine, and obviously that is your experience. I, however, have actually had a surprisingly positive year. Of course, it's not been without its challenges, but actually when I reflect back on the year, I actually think I've had such a wonderful time, not only, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, in building a community with you, but also in doing things that I had always wanted to do. And there is one thing that stands out that I did this year, that I achieved, and that I was so happy to finally be doing, and that is definitely the highlight of my year, and that is to have qualified as a yoga teacher. I started my yoga teacher training pretty much as soon as lockdown started in March, and I qualified in July. And it was just such a wonderful experience because it was so exciting to be educating myself. I was learning about philosophy, about yoga poses, about anatomy, which I loved. And it was such a wonderful experience because it was so intense. There was so much to learn and there was a lot to take in. And I basically had to learn to be a new person in the sense that I had to find my voice and identity as a yoga teacher, and I had to step into a new role. And it was so much to deal with, and yet it was incredible and a challenge that I really met head on and just absolutely embraced every single minute of it. But when that culminated at the end in actually qualifying as a yoga teacher, it just felt like such a surreal experience because it was something that I'd been thinking about doing for a really long time, and I finally did it. And honestly, I have no regrets because I love being a yoga teacher. And although yoga teaching isn't my full-time job, and honestly I don't think it actually ever will be because I also love my actual day job and I don't think I want to be a full-time yoga teacher, the opportunity to step into that role of being a yoga teacher has just been so incredible. I've had the opportunity to meet so many wonderful people through my classes, but I wanted to mention 2 people in particular who come to a lot of my classes and who I know watch these videos sometimes, and they are Sarah and Amy. They are just both so wonderful, and it has been so amazing to connect with them as a result of being a yoga teacher. And honestly, it's just incredible because I get to share yoga with people and make new friends, and it's just wonderful and I absolutely love it. And that also of course led to me then being able to start my yoga YouTube channel, which has been even more incredible than teaching yoga in person, because whilst I love teaching in-person classes, knowing that when I put my videos out on YouTube, they can reach the entire world and I can create a community of people who can understand the benefits of yoga and implement that in their life, that just feels so incredible. And of course it's free, and that feels amazing as well, to be able to share yoga, which is a practice that I'm so passionate about, with people without having to charge them astronomical amounts, which studio classes often are. It just feels so good. So being a yoga teacher, qualifying as a yoga teacher, and everything that has followed that has definitely been one of my favourite moments of this year. So with that being said, I think those are all of the favourites that I wanted to talk to you about today. And honestly, like I said, I have just loved making these favourites videos every single month. They make me so happy because it gives me that chance to reflect on the things that have brought me joy, and at the end of what has obviously been a really challenging year, and one that has just been such a roller coaster of emotions and experiences, being able to reflect back and look on all of the wonderful things I got to experience and do, even in these circumstances that 2020 left us with, I just feel so happy. And I hope that you have enjoyed reflecting on my favourite things of the year. I'd love to know some of your favourite things if you want to leave them in the comments below. And again, just to conclude this video, just wanted you to know how grateful I am that you are here, that you have been part of this YouTube community, and I can't wait to tackle 2021 as a community as well. So thank you so much for watching, for being here, and just for being wonderful. See you next time.